The air aboard the Celestera felt alive with tension. Humans were still new to the galactic stage, and every interaction felt like a high-stakes game. Ethan Voss, Earth's representative, adjusted his collar as he stood among a dazzling array of alien species in the Grand Chamber. Towering beings with crystalline skin glimmered in the soft light, insectoid diplomats clicked their mandibles in hushed conversation, and bioluminescent creatures floated gracefully above the polished floor. Yet it was the Xivanth delegation that held everyone's attention. The Xivanth were the most advanced species present, their wisdom and technology unmatched across the galaxy. They stood tall and elegant, with shimmering, translucent skin that refracted light into 1,000 colors. Their leader, the High Priestess Lyrantha, moved with an otherworldly grace. Her long, flowing robes seemed to ripple like liquid starlight as she stepped forward, her golden eyes scanning the crowd. Ethan tried to appear calm, but his heart raced. This wasn't just another routine summit. It was humanity's chance to prove themselves. For years, Earth had fought to earn a seat at the Galactic Council, and this meeting could determine their future among the stars. Lyrantha raised a delicate, glowing hand, and silence fell over the chamber. Today, her melodic voice resonated. We honor an ancient tradition of the Xivanth, a ritual of unity and renewal. Ethan listened intently, though much of what she said felt cryptic. The Xivanth were known for their secrecy, their customs shrouded in mystery. And, Lyrantha continued, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. For the first time, we will choose an outsider to partake in this sacred rite. A ripple of surprise spread through the chamber. Outsiders had never been included in Xivanth rituals. Ethan caught a glimpse of the other delegates. Some were intrigued, others visibly uneasy. The tension mounted as Lyrantha's gaze locked onto him. "You," she said, her voice both commanding and serene. "Ethan Voss of Earth." The room seemed to hold its breath. Ethan froze, disbelief coursing through him. Why him? He wasn't a scientist, a warrior, or anyone extraordinary. He was just a diplomat, a bridge builder, not a risk-taker. "Me," Ethan finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. Lyrantha inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "You have been chosen." A murmur rose from the human delegation. Ambassador Chan, Ethan's superior, looked at him with wide eyes, silently mouthing, "What did you do?" Ethan shrugged helplessly. I'm honored," Ethan said, stepping forward despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "But may I ask why?" Lyrantha's lips curved into a faint smile. "Your species is young, yet full of potential. You embody curiosity, resilience, and unpredictability. These traits make you interesting." Ethan wasn't sure if interesting was a compliment or a warning, but he knew one thing: refusing wasn't an option. If he turned this down, it would signal weakness, a failure to rise to the occasion. Humanity couldn't afford that. He squared his shoulders and nodded. "Then I accept." The room erupted in whispers, some admiring his courage, others questioning his sanity. The Xivanth delegation remained composed, though a flicker of surprise passed across Lyrantha's face, as if she hadn't expected him to agree so readily. "Very well," Lyrantha said, motioning for Ethan to follow her. "Come." As he walked beside her, Ethan's thoughts raced. What was this ritual? What would it entail? The Xivanth were known for their mind-bending technology and practices that defied logic. Was he about to undergo some strange experiment? The whispers of the other species faded as they entered a long, glowing corridor. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the structure itself was alive. Ethan glanced at Lyrantha, who seemed completely at ease. "High Priestess," he ventured, his voice cautious, "I appreciate this honor, but I need to know, what does this ritual involve?" She looked at him, her golden eyes shimmering like molten metal. "It is a merging of essences, a communion of minds, hearts, and truths." Ethan frowned. That sounded vague. "And what happens if it goes wrong?" Lyrantha stopped, her expression softening. Then you will show us something we have never seen before. Failure. That didn't comfort him, but her next words caught him off guard. And yet, she added, I do not believe you will fail. They reached the entrance to a vast, glowing chamber. The walls sparkled with shifting constellations, and in the center stood a swirling vortex of energy, alive, vibrant, and humming with power. Ethan stared, awestruck. Your journey begins here, Lyrantha said, her voice almost a whisper. Are you ready? Ethan took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He didn't know if he was ready, but he knew he had to try. For humanity, he muttered to himself, stepping forward into the unknown. Ethan Voss followed High Priestess Lyrantha into the glowing chamber, the pulse of his heart matching the rhythm of the shimmering walls. The air inside was heavy but not stifling, more like the weight of something ancient pressing down on him. Strange symbols floated in the air, their meanings elusive yet tantalizing, as if his mind was on the verge of understanding something profound. What is this place? Ethan asked, his voice hushed. The Temple of Eternal Unity, Lyrantha replied, her golden eyes flickering with light. It is where we connect to the essence nexus, the living energy that binds all life in the galaxy. Few outsiders have ever entered here. Fewer still have stood where you now stand. Ethan tried not to let the weight of her words unnerve him, but it wasn't easy. The chamber seemed to breathe, its luminescent walls shifting in colors that his human mind could barely process. He had seen many incredible sights in his diplomatic travels, but this place made him feel small in a way that was both humbling and terrifying. Ahead, the swirling energy vortex dominated the room. It was alive, like a storm of stars frozen in perpetual motion, yet it moved with a strange grace. Ethan felt a pull, not physical, but something deeper, as if the nexus was reaching for him. Ethan Voss, Lyrantha said, her voice breaking through his thoughts. Do you feel it? He nodded. It's calling to me. She smiled faintly. The nexus is aware of you. It senses your essence, your potential. That is why you were chosen. Ethan swallowed hard. I still don't understand what this ritual involves. You said it's a merging of essences. What does that mean, exactly? Lyrantha gestured for him to follow her closer to the nexus. As they walked, she spoke with a calm certainty. The Xivanth believe in balance. Through the nexus, we merge with others to share strengths and understand weaknesses. It is a sacred act, a way of building bridges between minds and cultures. Ethan furrowed his brow. So, this is like sharing knowledge. It is far more than that, Lyrantha said. It is an exchange of being. You will experience my essence as I will experience yours. If successful, we will both emerge stronger, wiser. But it is not without risks. Ethan stopped in his tracks, the word risks ringing loudly in his head. What kind of risks are we talking about here? The merging can be overwhelming, Lyrantha admitted, her gaze softening. Your essence is untested. The Nexus has never encountered humanity before. There is a possibility of imbalance, even failure, but the Nexus chose you for a reason. Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. He wasn't a hero or a warrior. He was just a diplomat. Yet, standing here, on the cusp of something so profound, he couldn't back down. This wasn't just about him. It was about humanity proving it could hold its own in the galaxy. All right, he said, his voice firmer than he felt. What do I need to do? Lyrantha extended her hand toward the vortex. Step forward. The Nexus will guide you through the trials. Trials? Ethan echoed, his stomach sinking. 3 trials, she said. Mind, body, and spirit. They will test your essence to see if you are worthy of the merging. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He had seen enough movies to know how these things usually went. Still, he nodded, stepping closer to the swirling energy. The moment his foot crossed an invisible threshold, the Nexus flared with light, bathing him in its radiance. The world around him dissolved in a flash. Ethan found himself in a strange, endless void, surrounded by shifting shapes and colors. He could hear whispers, voices speaking in languages he didn't understand, yet their meaning felt clear. The first trial began. Images and puzzles materialized before him, their complexity growing with each passing moment. Ethan realized this was a test of his mind, challenging his logic and reasoning. Symbols danced before him, asking to be deciphered. He hesitated, then began piecing them together, relying on instinct and deduction. Each success brought a surge of energy, but the puzzles became harder faster. His heart pounded as he struggled to keep up. Just when he thought he couldn't go on, the void shifted, and the whispers fell silent. The second trial began. Ethan now stood in a vast, alien battlefield. Strange creatures charged at him, their forms shifting and blurring like living shadows. He had no weapons, no armor, only his instincts. As the creatures lunged, he dodged, using his agility and quick thinking to outmaneuver them. The trial wasn't about brute strength, he realized, but adaptability. Exhausted but determined, he overcame the final wave, only for the world to change again. The third trial began. Ethan was surrounded by darkness, his own voice echoing back at him. This trial was different. It was inside his mind. Memories surfaced, both painful and joyous. He saw moments of doubt, fear, and failure, but also triumph and resilience. The darkness seemed to probe his very soul, searching for weakness. "I'm not perfect," Ethan said aloud, his voice steady. "But I don't give up." The darkness receded, replaced by the glow of the Nexus. Ethan stood taller, his essence tested but intact. When the void shattered and reality returned, he was back in the chamber. Lyrantha stood before him, her expression unreadable. "You have passed the trials," she said softly. "The merging can begin." Ethan exhaled, his body trembling but his resolve stronger than ever. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it. Ethan Voss stood in the heart of the glowing temple of eternal unity, his mind racing. The Nexus pulsed before him like a living entity, swirling in brilliant colors that seemed to shift and twist with a mind of their own. High Priestess Lyrantha stood to his side, her golden eyes watching him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as though she could see into the deepest corners of his soul. "Are you ready?" Lyrantha asked, her voice a soft whisper that seemed to echo through the chamber. Ethan nodded, his hands slightly trembling. He had survived the first two trials, mind and body, but this final test would be the most difficult. It was a trial of spirit, a trial of who he was at his core. The Nexus responded to his nod, flaring with light as it seemed to reach out for him. Without another word, Lyrantha stepped back, her presence fading into the shadows. Ethan was alone now, the weight of the ritual pressing heavily on his shoulders. The world around him shifted, and suddenly he found himself standing in a vast, dark landscape. The sky above was a swirl of black and violet clouds, streaked with distant lightning. The air was thick with the scent of ozone. It felt cold, oppressive. The ground beneath his feet was uneven, cracked, and barren. He squinted into the darkness, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see past the shadows. There was nothing, no life, no movement, just a vast, empty void stretching on forever. Ethan's heart raced. This was not what he had expected. It was as though he was standing in the middle of his own fears, the fears that he had pushed aside for years. A bitter wind swept across the landscape, sending a chill through his body. He clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a silhouette moving towards him. It was tall and imposing, its shape flickering in and out of focus. As it drew closer, Ethan could make out a faint outline, but the details were elusive, like a mirage. His pulse quickened. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling, unsure of whether he was ready to face whatever this being was. The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing a face that made Ethan's heart stop in his chest. It was him. A darker, twisted version of himself, with hollow eyes and a cruel, mocking smile. This version of himself was everything he feared he might become, a man broken by the pressures of the galaxy, consumed by doubt, fear, and failure. The dark version of Ethan spoke, his voice cold and hollow. "You are nothing. You are weak. You've always been weak." Ethan's breath hitched as the words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had always feared failure, always struggled with feelings of inadequacy. He had been chosen for this ritual, yes, but deep down, he had always wondered if he truly deserved it, if he was enough. "You're right," Ethan whispered to himself. "I'm not enough." The dark version of him laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the void. "You think you can face that exivant, that you can represent humanity. You can't even face your own fears. You're destined to fail." The words stung, but they also rang true. Ethan could feel the weight of his insecurities pressing down on him. This was his deepest fear, being found out, being exposed for not being the strong, capable diplomat the galaxy thought he was. But in the face of this fear, something began to stir within him, a spark of defiance. "No," Ethan said, his voice firmer now. "I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But I've never stopped trying. I've never given up." The dark version of him sneered, taking a step closer. "You've failed, Ethan. You always will." Ethan clenched his fists tighter. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his breathing quickening. But he also felt something else, strength. It wasn't a strength of muscle or mind, but something deeper. It was the strength to keep going, even when things were hard. The strength to rise above doubt, above fear. "I've failed," Ethan said, louder now. "But that doesn't mean I'm done. I've made mistakes, but I learned from them. I fight, and I don't quit." The dark version of him flickered, his form wavering. The mockery in his eyes faded, replaced by something else, something like fear. The ground beneath them began to shake as if the very foundation of this twisted world was cracking apart. "You think you can defeat me?" The dark version sneered one last time. "You can't." "I can," Ethan replied, his voice unwavering. With a surge of energy, the dark version of Ethan crumbled into dust, vanishing into the void. The world around him shifted again, and suddenly, Ethan found himself standing in the middle of a field bathed in soft, golden light. The dark landscape was gone. The oppressive weight on his shoulders had lifted. He had faced his fear, and he had won. As the light enveloped him, Ethan felt a wave of warmth, a connection to something greater. He wasn't perfect, but he didn't have to be. He was human, and that was enough. He had passed the trial of spirit. The test wasn't about being flawless. It was about strength in the face of fear and uncertainty. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the light wash over him. When he opened them again, he was back in the temple, standing before Lyrantha, who regarded him with quiet approval. "You have passed, Ethan Voss," she said softly. "The trials are complete. Now, the merging can begin." Ethan exhaled, his body trembling but his heart steady. Whatever came next, he was ready. The air in the temple of eternal unity felt heavier now, charged with a deep energy that made Ethan's skin tingle. The glowing nexus in the center of the room had settled into a calm, rhythmic pulse, as if it was waiting for something or someone. Ethan felt that weight, as though the nexus was aware of him, of the human essence that had passed through its trials. He stood before it, uncertain, yet determined. He had come this far, and now there was no turning back. Lyrantha stood beside him, her figure draped in the shimmering, star-like robes that seemed to flow and ripple with her every movement. Her golden eyes locked onto his, steady and intense. "You are ready, Ethan Voss," Lyrantha said, her voice calm and sure. There was no doubt in her words, no hesitation. "The merging is a sacred act, one that will bind your essence to mine. When we join, we will become more than we are alone." Ethan nodded, though his heart raced in his chest. The ritual he was about to undertake was not something he could have ever imagined. The Exivent had never invited a human into their most sacred rites, and now he was the one chosen. He couldn't help but wonder, as Lyrantha's eyes met his, if this was the galaxy's way of testing humanity, of testing him. "Do not fear," Lyrantha added softly, as if reading his thoughts. "The Nexus will guide us. It is the bridge between all life." He swallowed hard, gathering his thoughts. He wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore, not after everything he had faced. He had seen the depth of his own strength in the trials. He was ready for this, for whatever came next. Slowly, Lyrantha extended her hand towards the Nexus, her fingers tracing the air as though she was coaxing the energy to respond. The room around them seemed to shimmer with energy, and Ethan felt his body instinctively lean toward the glowing light. There was a pull, a magnetic force that urged him forward. The Nexus beckoned, and he obeyed. Without hesitation, Ethan took Lyrantha's hand, and together they stepped toward the swirling vortex of light. The moment their hands touched, the Nexus erupted with light, flooding the room with a brilliance so intense it felt as though it could burn through the very fabric of reality. Ethan's body tingled as waves of energy surged through him, flooding his senses. He gasped as the energy began to course through his veins, pulling at him in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. He could feel it, not just in his body, but in his mind, in his very soul. It was as though he was being drawn into the center of the galaxy, into the heart of the universe itself. Lyrantha's presence beside him felt like a steady anchor in the storm of sensations. Her essence blended with his, flowing together in an intricate dance that was both disorienting and enlightening. He could feel the depth of her thoughts, her memories, her wisdom, centuries of knowledge and experience flooding into him. At the same time, his own essence was reaching out to hers, drawing on everything he was, his memories, his emotions, his humanity. It was a strange feeling, but not as overwhelming as he expected. Instead, it was almost comforting. For the first time since this whole journey began, Ethan felt truly connected to something greater. The Nexus was not just an energy field. It was alive, a sentient force that guided them, shaping and molding their bond. Then came the moment of truth. The swirling light around them intensified, and Ethan felt a sudden shock, as if the very core of his being was being tested. He could feel his humanity pulsing within him, fighting to remain distinct, to hold on to its individuality. But the Nexus wasn't asking for separation. It was asking for unity. And in that moment, Ethan knew that he had to surrender to it. He had to let go. His mind drifted as his essence intertwined with Lyrantha's, the boundaries between them fading away. He could see her thoughts, feel her emotions, and understand the vastness of her experience. And in return, she felt the rawness of his humanity, the vulnerability, the passion, and the drive to overcome. It was a strange blend of identities, two beings coming together in a fusion of knowledge and emotion. It was not just about knowledge, it was about experience. It was about understanding one another on a deeper level, beyond the physical realm. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Ethan's thoughts stretched outward, his awareness expanding beyond the temple, beyond the chamber, and into the vastness of the stars themselves. He saw the universe as it was, in all its intricate complexity, billions of worlds, each teeming with life, each with its own story to tell. The Exivent had known this vastness for centuries, but for Ethan, it was all new, all wondrous. He saw the potential of humanity, how it fit into the larger cosmic tapestry. It wasn't just about survival. It was about growth, about unity, about connection. Lyrantha's presence beside him was like a guiding force, her essence pushing him to see the beauty of the universe without fear. He could feel the wisdom in her, centuries of existence, of learning, of teaching. But it wasn't cold or distant. It was warm, alive. And as he understood her, he realized that humanity could learn much from the Exivent, but they could also offer something unique, something that no other species could give. A sudden pulse of energy broke through the shared connection, and Ethan's consciousness snapped back to reality. He gasped, his body jolting as he returned to the present. The nexus had begun to slow, the energy gradually fading. The room around them was quiet again, the brilliant light dimming to a soft glow. Lyrantha's eyes met his once more, and for the first time, Ethan saw something new in them: respect, admiration, and something like warmth. She had felt it too. "You have done it," Lyrantha said softly. "We have merged, and in doing so, we have created something greater than we were alone." Ethan stood in silence, his body humming with the aftereffects of the ritual. He felt change, yet grounded, stronger, yet more connected to the galaxy around him. There was still so much he didn't understand, but he knew one thing for certain: humanity had a place among the stars. And he, Ethan Voss, was a part of something far greater than he could have ever imagined. The journey was only just beginning. Ethan stood in the center of the Temple of Eternal Unity, his body still vibrating with the energy of the ritual. The nexus, now calm, was a soft glow that pulsed gently, as though it was content after the merging of his essence with Lyrantha's. There was a new stillness in the air, a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. Ethan's mind felt clearer than ever, as though everything in the galaxy was within his reach. Beside him, Lyrantha was equally quiet, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. There was something different about her, too. She seemed more alive, more connected, in a way that went beyond her usual presence. "You did it," Lyrantha said softly, her voice filled with both wonder and pride. "We have merged, and now our knowledge is one." Ethan nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. He had felt it during the ritual, the overwhelming connection to the nexus, the rush of understanding that had washed over him. It was as though he had touched the very heart of the universe. For the first time, he could understand that Sci-Fi's long view of time, their deep connection to the stars, to the cosmic forces that shaped everything. "Your species, you're unlike anything I've ever felt," Lyrantha continued, her gaze fixed on him. "Humanity is not just about survival. You have something special, something rare. Your resilience, your ability to grow despite the odds. That is what makes you unique." Ethan felt a warmth at her words, but there was also a weight. The responsibility that came with this merging was vast. He now understood more than he ever could have imagined. About the Sci-Fi, about the galaxy, and about humanity's place in it. But how could he explain this to others? How could he show them that humanity was capable of more than just conflict and survival? Lyrantha seemed to sense his unease. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch light but firm. "You are the one who will bridge the gap. The one who will show the galaxy what humanity can do." This merging was not just about gaining knowledge. It was about forging a new path forward, for both of us. Ethan looked at her, his heart racing. He had always been a diplomat, but now, this felt like a new kind of mission, one that would take him beyond negotiation tables and political talks. This was about changing the future, about uniting different species in ways that hadn't been possible before. "What do I do now?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but uncertain. Lyrantha smiled, her expression softening. "You will return to your people, but you will do so with new eyes, with the understanding that you have the power to change the galaxy. The knowledge of the nexus is now a part of you, and it will guide you." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't deny the truth of her words. The merging had given him access to knowledge he could never have dreamed of. He could feel it, deep within his mind, in the recesses of his soul. The wisdom of the Sci-Fi, the understanding of the stars, the connection to the cosmic flow of life. But he wasn't sure how to use all of it. How could one person, one human, bear such knowledge without losing themselves? Before he could speak, Lyrantha's eyes softened with empathy. "Do not worry, Ethan. The knowledge will not overwhelm you. The Nexus chose you because you are strong enough to carry it. But remember, it is not for you alone. You must share it. Use it to guide your people. Ethan nodded, but the burden still felt heavy. How could he go back to Earth and explain to his people what had happened? Would they believe him? Would they understand? I'll do my best, he said quietly, more to himself than to Lyrantha. She gave a knowing smile. That is all anyone can ask. The air around them seemed to shift again. The soft glow of the Nexus was fading, and the chamber was beginning to return to its original, tranquil state. The energy that had once felt so overwhelming now felt like a quiet presence, a distant hum in the background. As Ethan turned to leave, he paused for a moment. I have so many questions, so much I still don't understand. Lyrantha's voice was gentle, but her words carried the weight of the galaxy. You will find the answers in time, Ethan. The merging has only just begun. You will grow, and you will learn, as will your people. Ethan exhaled slowly, the weight of his new role settling on his shoulders. He didn't know how he was going to do it, how he was going to take what he had learned and share it with humanity. But he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't do it alone. This was just the beginning of something much bigger, something that would take time, patience, and most of all, trust. As he walked toward the exit of the temple, Lyrantha's words echoed in his mind. Humanity has something rare, something special. He wasn't just a diplomat anymore. He was a bridge between worlds, between species, and between the stars. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Ethan felt ready. Ready to carry the weight of the knowledge he had gained. Ready to show the galaxy what humanity could achieve. He stepped out of the temple, the cool air of the alien world surrounding him. The stars above shone brightly, as if welcoming him into a new chapter of his life. The universe was vast, full of unknowns. But now, Ethan knew he wasn't alone. And neither was humanity. Ethan stood on the edge of the Temple of Eternal Unity, the vast alien landscape stretching before him. The stars above twinkled like diamonds scattered across a velvet sky. A soft breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the scent of strange flowers that grew in the otherworldly terrain. It was peaceful here, almost too peaceful. And yet, his mind was far from calm. The merging had changed everything. His connection to Lyrantha and the Nexus had given him a deeper understanding of the universe, but it also left him with a tremendous responsibility. He now knew that humanity had a special place in the galaxy, a place of potential and promise. But how would his people react to this knowledge? How could he explain the vastness of what he had experienced and learned? Lyrantha had told him to share the wisdom of the Nexus with humanity, but where did he even begin? Would they believe him? Would they welcome this new path, or would they reject it out of fear? The galaxy was full of wonder, but it was also full of dangers. There were many species who didn't want to see humanity rise, who might view their newfound knowledge as a threat. Ethan, Lyrantha's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to find her standing a few steps behind him, her presence as steady and reassuring as always. It is time for you to return. The path ahead may be uncertain, but it is a path only you can walk, and your people will follow when they are ready. Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. When they are ready, that was the key. Humanity wasn't ready for the kind of unity the Nexus represented, not yet. But they could be. And that was why he had to return. To help them see what was possible, to show them the future they could build together with the rest of the galaxy. He nodded, though doubt still gnawed at his insides. I'm not sure I'm ready for all of this. I don't even know how to explain what happened. You don't need to explain it all at once, Lyrantha said, her voice gentle. The knowledge is in you now, Ethan. The understanding of humanity's place among the stars will grow in time. You will guide them, one step at a time. Ethan nodded again, though it didn't fully calm the storm of uncertainty in his chest. The path ahead was foggy, like trying to navigate a darkened road without a map. He was a diplomat, yes, but this was something entirely new. It wasn't just about politics or trees anymore. This was about building something greater, something that could unite species across the stars. He turned to Lyrantha. I don't know how long it will take. I don't know if humanity is ready. Lyrantha's eyes softened, the golden light in them flickering like stars. Time is a concept that is different for us, but you are human. You understand time, change, and growth in a way that no other species can. It is your strength, Ethan. Trust in that. He was quiet for a long moment, gazing out at the horizon. There was no clear answer, no simple solution. But one thing was clear. Humanity had a role to play in the galaxy. And it wasn't just about surviving or proving themselves. It was about connecting with others, about learning and growing. Humanity had the ability to shape the future, and he, Ethan Voss, had been chosen to help guide them. Finally, he turned back to Lyrantha, a determined look on his face. I'm ready to return, but I'll need help. I won't be able to do this alone. Lyrantha smiled, the warmth in her eyes evident. You will not be alone. The Nexus is with you, and so am I. With that, the two of them made their way back to the central chamber of the temple. The Nexus, still glowing softly, hummed with energy, its pulse steady and calm. Ethan stood before it once more, feeling its power wash over him. This time, however, it felt different. It no longer overwhelmed him. Now it felt like an old friend, a guiding force that would help him find his way. Lyrantha stepped forward, raising her hands in a graceful motion. The Nexus responded, the light intensifying for a moment, before the room began to shift. The walls seemed to dissolve, and the air around them became thick with energy. The process of transport had begun. Ethan's heart beat faster as the familiar sensation of being pulled through space enveloped him. He closed his eyes, feeling the stars around him, the vast expanse of the universe stretching out. It was as if the fabric of reality itself was bending to their will. Then, just as quickly as it had begun, the sensation stopped. Ethan opened his eyes to find himself back in the place where it all began, Earth. He stood on a wide open field, the familiar landscape of his home planet before him. The sky was the same blue, the grass the same green. It felt strange, almost surreal, as if he had been away for centuries, not just a few weeks. The weight of everything he had learned pressed on him. But this time, it wasn't overwhelming. He had come back with a purpose, and the world would soon know that humanity's place in the universe was no longer just a dream, it was a reality. Lyrantha stood beside him, her eyes taking in the familiar sights of Earth. You are home, Ethan, but remember, this is just the beginning. Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle in him. The road ahead would be long and filled with uncertainty, but he was ready to face it. With the knowledge of the Nexus and the strength of humanity behind him, he would help guide his people to a new future. This was his mission, and he would see it through. Let's begin, he said, his voice steady, his heart filled with purpose. And with that, Ethan stepped forward, ready to show humanity what they could achieve. The galaxy was vast, but it was theirs to explore, to unite, and to shape. Together. The days that followed Ethan's return to Earth felt like a blur. He was back in his home world, surrounded by familiar sights, sounds, and people. Yet everything had changed. The knowledge he had gained from the Nexus, the merging with Lyrantha, the understanding of humanity's potential, was now part of him. It flowed through his mind like a river of possibilities, constantly reminding him of the enormous task that lay ahead. Ethan knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He had to find a way to share what he had learned, to make humanity see the greater picture, the part they could play in a much larger cosmic story. But how? How could he make people understand something so vast, so beyond their everyday lives? He spent the first few weeks processing everything. It wasn't just the knowledge of the Xivant that he now carried. It was their wisdom, their centuries of experience, their understanding of the universe and its forces. And yet, as much as he had learned, it still felt like there was more. a deeper layer of wisdom that he couldn't fully reach, not yet. He had to start somewhere, though. Earth was his home, and it was here he would begin. But the world was not ready for the full extent of what he knew. The political systems, the military powers, the divisions between nations, they would not simply accept the truth of what he had experienced. And that was one of the first challenges he faced. How could he show them the truth without causing chaos? How could he bridge the gap between what they believed and what he now knew to be possible? Ethan decided to take small steps. He began by meeting with leaders from various organizations, speaking with scientists, diplomats, and visionaries who could understand the importance of cooperation and unity. He had to start with those who were open-minded, who had a hunger for knowledge and growth. They were the ones who would help him spread the message, even if it meant starting small. One evening, as he sat in his office, preparing for a meeting with a group of influential thinkers, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Lyrantha. He had stayed in contact with her, although their conversations were brief. She had her own duties, her own responsibilities in the galaxy, but she had promised to help him as much as she could. The message was simple. Do not fear the unknown. It is part of the journey. You are not alone. The Nexus is with you. Her words brought him a sense of calm. The weight of what he carried was still heavy, but Lyrantha's reminder was grounding. He wasn't alone. He had allies, both known and unknown. And the universe, vast and mysterious, had ways of supporting those who were willing to seek truth and share it. The next day, Ethan stood before a group of influential leaders from various countries and organizations, gathered in a secure location. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The room was filled with tension as these powerful individuals exchanged curious glances, wondering what Ethan would reveal. He knew this was his chance to begin building the foundation of what he had learned. There was no turning back now. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me today, Ethan began, his voice steady but filled with purpose. What I have to share with you may seem unbelievable, but I assure you, it is the truth. Humanity has a future in the stars, not just as a species that survives, but as one that thrives and connects with others across the galaxy. We are not alone. The room fell silent. Ethan could see the disbelief in their eyes, but also a flicker of interest. He had expected this, skepticism, confusion, maybe even fear, but he pressed on. I know this may sound impossible, but I've seen it. I've experienced it. There are civilizations out there, species far older and wiser than we are, who have been waiting for humanity to grow. The path forward for us is not just about survival, it's about unity. It's about reaching out to others, learning from them, and creating a future where we are part of a greater community of life. He paused, letting the words sink in. He could see some of the leaders exchanging looks, others trying to process what he was saying. It was hard to believe, especially with so many conflicts, so many challenges facing Earth right now. But Ethan had to keep going. There are those who will try to keep us from reaching out. Fear and doubt will always be present. But we are stronger than that. We have something unique, something no other species has, the ability to unite, to grow, to adapt in ways no one expects. It's time for us to step forward. One of the leaders, a woman from the United Nations, spoke up. What are you asking of us, Ethan? How can we trust something so outlandish? Ethan smiled, knowing that this moment would come. He had expected the questions, the doubts, the resistance. I'm not asking you to trust me just yet. I'm asking you to look beyond what you know. There are scientists, thinkers, and leaders who have been working on this for years. And I am asking you to work with them, to take the first step toward understanding what is out there. There was silence for a long moment. Ethan felt his heart pounding. He had no guarantees, no promises of success, but he had to try. Finally, another leader spoke, a man from a major research institute. We need more proof, more understanding. If what you're saying is true, then it changes everything. We can't just accept it without evidence. Ethan nodded. I understand. But the evidence is out there, and we can find it together. This is just the beginning. He knew it wasn't going to be easy. There would be more meetings, more questions, and more challenges ahead. But as he left the room that day, a sense of hope filled him. The journey was far from over, but it had begun. And this time, humanity would not walk alone. As Ethan stepped out into the sunlight, the weight of his mission still pressing on him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism. The stars above, once so distant, now seemed just a little bit closer, and he was ready to lead humanity toward them.